Hey everyone. So in this article I'm going to be referencing, once again from the CBC, yeah, that's that source that confuses and confounds Canadians to a substantial degree. And that's why I continue to cover their articles, because I want to push back against that kind of mass confusion that they try to propagate in your head and try to help clear things up for you. Because if there's one thing I understand intrinsically, is a properly educated, informed society or population is what's required if genuine freedom and liberty is what you're looking for. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, folks, no matter how much bickering goes on, regardless of ideology or which side of the political spectrum people align with, at the end of the day, we all want to be free from forced subjugation, slavery, or indentured servitude. Headline out of CBC News Business: inflation in Canada spikes to 2.4% on higher prices for food. Statistics Canada's Consumer Price Index shows increases in all 8 major categories. It's being reported on June 19th, 2019. So I'm sure as a Canadian you're very well familiar with the fact that the proponents of big government and these so-called experts or economists, I can say what a joke these days, these labels don't mean much anymore, unfortunately, because they're used to prop up people that, they don't necessarily align or even acknowledge what genuine proper economics are supposed to entail. Well, I guess it's their truth as far as economics goes, right? But once you strip morality or universality or objective standards out of the equation, well then, I guess you can put out articles such as this that suggest that inflation is actually a good thing. You as the end consumer who have to pay all the higher prices or see the devaluation or the destruction of your purchasing power as a result of this artificially stimulated inflation, that's a bad thing for you. Now, if you got to pay more money for that roof over your head or the food in your belly or the fuel in your car or the natural gas heating your home, that's not good for you. I mean, it may be good for some people, may be good for the corporations who are benefiting as a result, or the government who are also benefit as a result due to increased taxation on those higher costs. Yeah, sure, it might be good for them, but once again, it's all subjective at the end of the day when you're talking about inflation, which is why I've said so many times in the past, you really got to pay attention to the kind of people who are promoting inflation, and at least come around to starting to acknowledge and recognize that they do so because they're the ones that benefit. Canadians may be feeling a price pinch as inflation rose to 2.4% in May from the same month 1 year ago, led by higher prices for food. That compares to a rise of 2% in April, according to Statistics Canada's Consumer Price Index, CPI, released Wednesday. Year-over-year prices rose in all 8 categories of the index, with notable increase in food prices, up 4% in the 12 months leading up to May 2019, after increasing 3% in April. Faster than average growth in food prices was driven by a 16.7% spike in the cost of fresh vegetables compared to a year ago, as well as a 2.9% increase in the price of meat. Durable goods got 2.5% more expensive in the past year, while the cost of new vehicles rose by 4.2%. One exception was gasoline, which dipped 3.7% in price compared to May 2018. Energy is one of the rare commodities that fell in price in the past year by 0.1% in that span. Within that, gasoline has fallen by 3.7%. If energy is stripped out, inflation would have been 2.7%. But that headline inflation number is notoriously volatile, easily skewed by individual factors. So the data agency also comes up with a so-called core inflation rate by tabulating the average of 3 other subrates with a lot of sectors stripped out. So this is where you get into the manipulation of numbers, facts, and statistics. Like I say, central planning, folks, you can't use it as a reliable factor and determine anything when you're talking about economics, because as you can see, it can be manipulated and is manipulated on a regular and continuing ongoing basis. The core inflation rate came in at 2.1%, the highest on record since 2012. The strong inflation reading means the Bank of Canada will be less likely to hike its own benchmark interest rate when it meets to set its policy next month. After the inflation number was released Wednesday, investors were pegging about a 6% chance of a rate cut next month, according to Bloomberg data. The acceleration in the core readings support the notion that the Bank of Canada is likely to remain on the sidelines, Toronto Dominion Bank economist James Marple said. While some of the factors pushing up price growth are likely to prove fleeting, we can't discount the relatively broad-based nature of price growth in May, he said. Inflation is back in Canada, at least for now. The Canadian dollar jumped by about half a cent after the numbers were released before giving up some of those gains. Late in the morning, the loonie was changing hands at just shy of 75 cents US. So once again, you're seeing this person, inflation is back in Canada. Oh, they're loving that. Like I say, it's all subjective. All depends on where you are in correlation to who benefits from inflation. Once again, you as the taxpayer, the wage slave in this country, or the end consumer, inflation is bad for you. The only inflation you should like or promote or want to see happening is wage inflation. Because if you have wage inflation, well, that actually generates more of your purchasing power in comparison to the price of all the consumable goods you use. And a lot of those consumable goods, as you're seeing, are things that you desperately need. You know, heat in your home, that roof over your head, that food in your belly to sustain you, and that gas or diesel that you need in your personal vehicle or your commercial vehicle that you use to operate your business. Once again, all those increases, and truck drivers know this in particular, the increase on energy as far as fuel costs, that digs deep into your bottom line and your profitability or your paycheck. Or should I say your income, because as an owner-operator, you're the one that pays for the fuel. If you're a driver for a corporation, well, you're just getting less of a wage or a raise if the employer has to pay higher premiums or costs on that fuel going in your truck to travel down the road. So once again, you as the employee, the end consumer, or the tax serf, inflation that's in excess of any wage increases you've gained or garnered is once again a destruction of your purchasing power and actually wage suppression or a decline in how much you're making in that year in comparison to the inflation of all the costs of everything that you consume. I've done many videos in the past regarding inflation, but once again, I feel it's very important to keep at least putting one out every once in a while to keep people understanding, or at least get some new people understanding that, yeah, inflation, as much as these central planners proponents or these big government lovers, yeah, it's not good for you. And you need to understand that inflation is a detriment to your bottom line. So when you hear these proponents of inflation out there talking about how great it is that inflation rates are up, well, you might want to use some of the information I've presented in this video to push back against their narrative. It's the Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.